I've been wanting to get this guy in for a long time. I met him in Las Vegas, in June of last year when he was here for a Trump rally. And I really enjoy his stuff. And I know a lot of the fans of my show love his stuff as well. He's known as Parker. Parker, get a job. And he is one of the biggest TikTok influencers out there. And of course, he's on the right side of history. Parker, I am so glad to have you on the show, my man. How are you?
I'm so glad to be on. How are you? I'm doing great today. Fantastic. Glad to be on. Hopefully everyone's having a good day so far.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, my man. I don't even know. Did you even have a chance to watch that press conference with Tulsi Gabbard and Caroline Leavitt? Because I wanted to get your thoughts on that because it was so ridiculous.
No, I've been busy all morning, so I'd love to hear what's been going on there.
Well, let me get your thoughts on this to start, if that's okay. And I want to ask you because it appears to me that this is a deflection, that Tulsi Gabbard is not in good, I guess you could say, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess she's not in good graces with Donald Trump, right? And it appears to me that they're spreading this Obamagate nonsense to try to deflect from the Epstein files, which I believe Donald Trump is all over. And we know that there is no Obamagate. We know that Russia did interfere in the elections. We know that 13 Russians were indicted by a grand jury. Even Marco Rubio admitted that. So I think this is deflection. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
I think I totally agree with that analysis. I think that Tulsi Gabbard was sent off to do Trump's dirty work to distract away from the Epstein files, because realistically, we can't explain this type of response if that is true. If Donald Trump is not on the Epstein files, he clearly would have dropped it by now. So it's seemingly that he's all over. I've also heard plenty of reports of like him telling agencies within the federal government to look for different mentions of Donald Trump within the Epstein files to try to remove those. So that's also interesting to look at as well, along with the fact that if it's true, if it actually is a hoax, a Democratic hoax, that wouldn't implicate any Democrats. Therefore, Democrats would have 100% released it. So this idea that like, oh, Democrats aren't releasing it because it is the case that it would indict them, right, would be all wrong if it's a hoax or a scam. So that's clearly a cover up on his behalf.
Parker, I agree with you. You debate probably more MAGA supporters than anybody that I know. And what is the excuse that you get from them? Because I would imagine you get into a lot of debates about this very topic. As you know, there's a lot of MAGA people that are very upset at Donald Trump. They want the files to be released. What is the excuse you get from your typical MAGA supporter that will call into your show?
I think MAGA's really divided on this issue. And this is one of the first times where I've ever seen MAGA like this. You know, I debate people and I've seen the narratives. They all come at once and they almost have like an entire structure of all of them running like the same arguments. Like back when it was Biden and running for office, it was practically everyone that would come up. It was cognitive decline. But really, in terms of the Epstein files, I've seen a vast array of different things. Some people are still defending him, calling it a hoax. Others are saying, oh, both sides are on it. Therefore, like, it just doesn't matter which side I support. Still going to support Trump regardless. Some people just don't care. They seriously are like, oh, if he's on the Epstein files, I don't give a fuck. So there's a lot of different array of views when it relates to Trump supporters. I don't think that they're very much on a common approach. And I have noticed there are less Trump supporters, right, since we've heard specifically all of this about the Epstein files, them not releasing it. And there's a huge breakoff. I think the main breakoff is of the far right from the Republican Party. I think that center right Republicans are still like in line with saying like, oh, even if he's on the files, it's probably just him on the airplane. And he wasn't actually involved in any of like the child sex trafficking or anything like that, even though he was like best buds with Epstein for like 15 years, right? And said that Epstein's a terrific guy and he likes beautiful women as much as he does. Many of them on the younger side, right? So like, I think it's very obvious at this point, you should be able to put two and two together, but their cult-like support literally will not allow them to see outside of that, to be like, oh, he could be implicated in any type of way. Even if he says he'll date a 10-year-old girl in 10 years, like he can get away with anything. He could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they wouldn't care.
That's true. And isn't it interesting, Parker, that so many people on the far right were calling Democrats the pedophiles. They were calling Joe Biden the pedophile who sniffs children, Hollywood elitists and, pedophile rings and conspiracy theories. And meanwhile, now we have the guy who at one point was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein, as you eloquently pointed out, seen with him at parties, at his wedding, everywhere, on his flight log 6 times. In fact, we know that Epstein flew on Donald Trump's private jet. But yet some in the MAGA world are saying, hey, there's nothing to see here. Even somebody like Mike Johnson, who has been talking about child trafficking forever. And by the way, I'm on his side. If there's anybody out there that's involved in child trafficking, I want them to go to jail, held to the highest extent of the law. And now it appears to me that he and many others are covering up for Donald Trump, knowing what's in those files.
Yeah, it's actually kind of insane, right? That like Trump supporters were so big about like, oh, Democrats are really scared to get Trump in office because he's going to do something about the Epstein files. Can you imagine if it was the case that like this was true about a Democrat, about Joe Biden, about Bill Clinton? That would have been literally the talk of the century for MAGA supporters. They would have said that this is implicating them of being on the island and everything. But because it's specifically Donald Trump, there's so much plausible deniability on their behalf that they just seemingly don't accept any of this information, which honestly, I'm going to be totally honest. I expected this because it is the case that they did so with plenty of the other horrible, disgusting behavior of Donald Trump's. Now, a lot of people are going to open up to it and be like, okay, wow, this is crazy. I'm not going to support him anymore. But there's going to be a lot of people out there, even people like, Charlie Kirk and Alex Jones, that are just going to end up bending the knee again, because it is the case that they were the ones making this big deal about, oh, the pedophile sex ring that exists that specifically they're using in order to like literally blackmail people. You have Mossad behind it and everything. That's what Alex Jones was saying for like literally the past 20 fucking years. And now apparently he's just going to believe Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That's just like unbelievable to me.
I agree with you. Unfortunately, Parker, I have to put a prerequisite in here. Unfortunately, we're on the radio, so we can't swear. I wish we could.
Oh
actually.
My gosh. Thank you for letting me know.
You're good. You're good. I appreciate that. By the way, I wish I could, by the way. I'm very envious of you because there's a lot of other words I would like to use to describe some of these Trump supporters that I can't say on the radio. If you're just joining us, Parker, get a job. One of the biggest anti-MAGA influencers, I would say, on social media. We're so glad he's here. There's so many different topics I want to get to with you in this short period of time, but I guess in general, I want to ask you this. I think we all knew that this would be horrible if Trump won in November, but I'm not sure I thought it would be this bad. I want to get your thoughts on this, just as far as immigration and people not getting due process, these tariffs that he's done. The war in Ukraine is worse off now than it was on day one. We got into, in my opinion, an ill-advised war with Iran. The economy is struggling. We're probably headed towards a recession. There's a lot of things I named there, but did you think, Parker, that it was going to be this bad and chaotic?
I knew it was going to be horrible, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad. And I really do apologize to any of the listeners. I really apologize. I'm used to doing that on my stream.
You're good. You're good. Don't worry about it.
I'm so sorry to any of the listeners.
That's okay.
Yes, I do think that in some ways it was going to be this bad. In some ways, I actually expected it could have been worse. And in some ways, it's even worse than I would have ever expected. Like, for example, in terms of tariffs, I actually expected them probably to have some sort of implementation of tariffs that was going to be long run, which was going to be incredibly negatively impactful to the economy. And I actually expected like us going towards a recession, which was a coming indicator, but we might actually revert back to like what we were. We just weren't going to get as much growth as we were otherwise, because for multiple quarters we had multiple percentage points growth in real GDP every single quarter. But then in quarter one 2025 we saw a decline by 0.3%. Same thing with real median wages. So we saw our economy essentially stagnate because of the imposition of the tariffs, and then even with the pause right after. But still, it didn't carry over as much, and we're likely to see growth coming in the next quarters and whatnot, because it is the case that he didn't continue the same level of tariffs that he was advocating for, especially on Liberation Day, because that was the largest tax increase, right, in the U.S. history, specifically if we're referencing tariffs. But if for some reason Trump and MAGA never want to talk about that, it's pretty interesting.
True. Parker, what scares you the most about the next 3.5 years? We're forced, with Donald Trump being the leader of the free world. I'm just wondering, there's a lot of different topics here that I'm sure concern you, but what bothers you? What worries you the most?
I think what worries me the most is what's going to happen coming near the end of the administration and how Trump's leaving power. Like, is he going to leave power? Is he going to try and instill his cronies into office? What is he specifically going to do to our democracy, to our system, right, when he's leaving? Right? I think that's an incredibly important thing to address. And I also wanted to talk about like the fact that he's violating of due process rights. I think this is just showing of the fact that if he's willing to violate due process rights, specifically of undocumented immigrants, that could likely, right, apply to people who are in this country legally. He's all even talked about, denaturalizing people, right? This likely I will see, we might see to a worse degree if they win in 2026. So that's why we need to get out there and we need to vote, because if they win, they will take a mile, even more than what they already have.
That's a really good point. Parker, you have so many videos that have gone viral, but I do want to specifically talk with you about Charlie Kirk. Yeah, you have this, for lack of a better term, run-in with Charlie Kirk. where you really only have 60 to 90 seconds. And clearly you can see he does not want a piece of you. He does not want to debate you. He does not want to talk to you. He doesn't really want anything to do with you. He wants to debate a bunch of these 18 and 19-year-old liberals on college campuses that obviously don't have the intellect, or with all due respect to them, or the knowledge that you have. Can you talk to me about that experience and why you think that the Charlie Kirks of the world just want nothing to do with Parker?
I think it's because I give him a hard time and I don't let him spread his propagandistic message, right, as easily as, say, other people do. Now, granted, when it comes to like the Jubilee scenario, right, there's only like a few minutes. A lot more interruptions like have to occur in order for me to be able to get my point out there and me to be able to hold him accountable on certain points. I mean, he was just lying and making ridiculous points. Like, we had the lowest point of carbon emissions in human history. You know, at that point, I feel like almost like an obligation to cut someone off in that circumstance because it's so wildly false. But when it comes to like the Jubilee format, right, I really wish that I could have had a longer form format to be able to debate him, because when I caught him off guard at CSUN, California State University, Northridge, I only got like a few minutes there and then he kicked me out.
I saw that.
It's seemingly that he won't debate me in any type of long form setting, because it is the case that he'll have to go really deep into these issues. We'll have to talk about religion. We'll have to talk about how he influences that in terms of his political beliefs, and then go deep in terms of his particular economic views, because the economic views of Donald Trump are extremely weak. And he knows that I have an econ degree. He was even complaining about it on the George Janko podcast about like how he was expecting meandering kids after a college class. But then like when I came and I was like, you know, I have a degree in economics, you know, and I was actually like knowing what I'm talking about, he was caught off guard. But he said I was like, I had a master's or something. I was literally, at the time in which we recorded that, I was like a few months graduated from college with a bachelor's at that point. So I had just graduated. I was a college kid. It just seemingly he just doesn't want to debate smart, educated, and in tuned with college kids that can debate him on every single point that he brings up and call him out for his bull crap.
And this is the same guy, correct me if I'm wrong, who has a high school diploma, who dropped out of community college, and he's trying to attack you for your education, which I find utterly ridiculous. You know, I wanted to ask you this because I've always seen you as a genuine person. I don't believe you say anything on your show, and you have a ton of content, right? You have like 6 hours a day of content, which is an enormous amount of content. I don't feel like you say anything to get ratings or to make money. You're genuine with your opinions. And I feel like a guy like a Charlie Kirk, or a Candace Owens, or a Matt Walsh, these types of people, a Jack Posobiec, who I debate on Piers Morgan all the time, I feel like they're not genuine at all. I don't feel like they believe the things they say. I believe they're just taking their paycheck and making money. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you really believe that the Candace Owens of the world and the Jack Posobiecs of the world and Charlie Kirks actually believe the things they say on a regular basis?
When it comes to people like Charlie Kirk, I actually really don't believe that he like really believes fully what he says in all circumstances, but I would say he believes a lot of what he says. It's within certain thresholds. So they obviously can, you know, say what they want, believe what they want, but then they have influences from other people to say specific things because they're a part of like the quote unquote MAGA movement. That's why Charlie Kirk originally was saying stuff about like, oh, we need to drop the Epstein files, and then caved to Trump and, you know, like sort of that type of response. He probably got a call, probably got some sort of response from the Trump team, right, in order to be able to talk that a certain way about the Epstein files to try to get them to go away. So a lot of them, I would say that they're just political propagandists. They do it for a check. They're doing whatever is going to be best for their party in their own eyes, which actually is antithetical to like his Christian beliefs, for example. But I don't even know how much he really holds to that, or if it's just specifically like, you know, political game, just like with Donald Trump.
You know, you're at a point now where wherever you go, you're going to be recognized. And I'm wondering, do you ever worry about your safety? Like when you go to a political rally, when you speak to MAGA supporters? Because I got to be honest with you, these days when I go to these events, I get a little worried. I mean, have you ever been in a situation like that before? And do you worry about that?
So yes, like I actually worry more a lot about like my girlfriend and like people in my life, my family. Being like targeted by people on the internet that more than I would care about like me specifically. But even then, like, for example, when I go to like protests or I go to rallies and stuff, I'm not going to be streaming on the internet. You know, I see a lot of other streamers do that, but honestly, I don't think that would be like safe to do, especially in such a big city with all of the people that dislike me on the internet. So yeah, I definitely am concerned about that and worried about that. And I always try to show up to things unannounced so that it is the case that people don't know where I'm going to be.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm wondering how you do this. And what I mean by that is, you know, if I have like 2 or 3 MAGA callers in a row, which happens, my brain wants to explode. And people say, Brian, you're so patient. Well, I'm really not. You're doing this 6 hours a day and prominently, right? You're debating MAGA people. I'm wondering mentally how you're able to do it day in and day out with these same MAGA supporters. And I'm just going to be honest, so many of them extremely ill-informed and uneducated. How do you have the patience, I guess, to do what you do every day?
I really love what I do, that I can affect the world in a positive way. I really believe in what I'm doing, and I think that I'm doing something that is good. And I think it comes from, like, I mean, I did this before I had any viewers. Like, I literally would go on Omegle and debate people randomly on the internet because I'm genuinely interested in these types of topics. I wanted to learn myself. And I also, like, I want to be able to take that information, that genuine approach, and I want to be able to show that to other people. I want to, like, be a good role model for people. And I think that that shows, like, really good for society. I think it's really good for men to especially have, like, good and positive role models within their communities, especially younger men. So, like, I think that those things are all really important. So I really, really, really believe in what I do. And it's really tough sometimes, like, especially, like, like my dog passed away just
Yeah,
recently.
sorry to hear that.
It was suffering in a really bad circumstance, and we knew that this was likely to come. And people will come up and they'll say horrible things about my dog, and they'll try to attack me for things like that. So that stuff, I think, is what hits me, and like, hits to the core the most, I would say. I've become very accustomed to dealing with MAGA callers and people who are having insane views. And I've really been trying to work on my patience in the long run. I've been taking from people like Alex O'Connor on, trying to be more patient. But, I obviously have my circumstances and times where I'm not as patient as I should be. But obviously, like, there are, insane people that I talk to on a daily basis. So that's expected.
I think I can relate to that too, Parker. I think you and I are similar when it comes to that. Sometimes I lose my patience with them as well. I'm just wondering, at your age, with what you've accomplished and how successful you are on social media and the huge following you have, like, if somebody came up to you when you were like 16 or 17 years old and said, you're going to be one of the most prominent voices on the left, because you are, and you would have the huge following that you have, what would you have said to yourself? Would you have said, I expected this? Or, like, if somebody told you this 6 or 7 years ago, what would you have said?
I definitely wouldn't have expected, especially because at that time I was a Trump supporter. So I was a Trump supporter in high school. So I definitely wouldn't have expected to have alternative beliefs than I had at that specific time. Although at that time I still would say I was totally open-minded and genuine. And I do think that like, I would never have expected this. When I was a kid, I made, Call of Duty videos and stuff like that, because I just genuinely liked making content. And, like, when I think I streamed one time and there was like 90 people in my stream, and I was freaking out because I was doing like open lobbies on a Call of Duty game or something like that. And I thought it was so cool, just other people being interested in the same stuff I am. And I would have never expected to genuinely have so many thousands of people engaging with my content on a daily basis. I didn't think I was that interesting. I didn't think people wanted to hear from me as much as that. And also, I didn't believe in myself as much as I should have. And I think that came from me sort of developing expectations around doing this more often. I have a lot of social anxiety. It's really hard for me to get into spaces like this and to, like, get out of my comfort zone. So it took me a while to be able to do that. And, I'm really happy with myself with how far I've come, and I'm really glad with that. So I think that if I was able to see where I am today, I would be happy in myself, even though back then I had differing opinions.
Yeah, you should be. I'm curious because this is starting to happen to me more. And obviously, I'm not at the level that you're at with your following. But I mean, places I go to now, concerts and public events, people start to come up to me. And again, I have a fraction of the following that you have. I'm wondering, going back to the first few times where people recognized you and maybe they asked you for a selfie or a picture, how did you handle that? Was that weird for you? And how have you adjusted to that?
So I've definitely adjusted to it because I've become more comfortable with it happening relatively commonly. But like, prior, when it first happened, I just thought I think it's so cool. Like, every single time I love talking to people, seeing them. Like, I love that people are enjoying the content and stuff like that. And also, it's like, it's not like I get recognized so much where it's like, I can't, like, get to daily things and stuff like that. Like, if it was like a Mr. Beast level of getting it in like a, attention every single day where you can't do stuff, then it could probably possibly be like a, negative impact in your life. But I think it's been incredibly positive. People have come up to been incredibly nice. Okay, wait, can you repeat some of the question? I think I only got part of it, and I kind of lost when I was answering.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just saying, like, do you remember, like, the first time somebody recognized you and asked you for a selfie or something? Like, how did that make you feel? Was it weird? What was that like, that first experience when you were first starting to get recognized, like, in public?
Yeah, so like I said, I have lots of social anxiety, so it was definitely like whoa, someone just like, oh my, someone just like, did someone just actually just recognize me? Like, what? That was crazy. Like, it really caught me off guard. Um, so I want to say that happened. It caught me off guard for like definitely like the first 10 people that first recognized me because I was not used to it. I thought it was so cool. I sat and talked to them for a long time, asked them like where they found me from, like what interests them in my content, things like that. I just thought it was so cool. And I had like so many questions. And I think that my wantingness to ask them questions and like knowing that they already knew who I was, like made me have more expectations for how like the engagement would go, where I was like not as anxious about it as I typically would be, if that makes sense.
It's amazing to me that you have a little bit of social anxiety, like you said, but yet you're so good with dealing with people that you disagree with on a daily basis. I find that so interesting, right? And that's extremely interesting. It was a little awkward for me as well. I'll be honest with you, but that I think that's super cool.